from Matthew 7, beginning at verse 13. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. So maybe what I'm getting at in today's message is watching out for false prophets, those wolves in sheep's clothing. You can decide that. Because I wanted to start today's message with this. John 13, verses 34 to 35. A new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. This command, and he calls it that, this command was given by Jesus on the night before his arrest, the day before his trial and crucifixion. His disciples were gathered with him in the upper room, and just a bit earlier, he had demonstrated to them the radical notion that love is a verb besides being a noun. He did that by washing their feet, the lowest task that could be imagined by anybody at the time in that culture. Now he had begun to tell them very specifically about what would be happening in the coming hours. He knew the game was on. He knew there was a conspirator in their midst, and he knew the end was soon coming. These are last hour instructions. The summation of everything that the disciples have heard Jesus say over the last 2-3 years. Remember me, Jesus has said over and over as he served them their Last Supper together. Remember what you have seen and what you have heard. Go and do likewise. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. If you love one another, everyone will know you are my disciples. Excuse me. The way behind Jesus, the path upon which he invited and invites his disciples to follow him, is simple. The Cold in October, Part 2 now. The way behind Jesus is simple. Love God, love your neighbor. It's so simple, but it is also dangerous. It takes a great deal of self-denial and humility. It takes a willingness to give time, give resources, and give that which seems so elusive at times, hope. It takes courage. That substance of being a disciple has been redefined by those who, and I will just say it straight out, the substance of being a disciple has been replaced, redefined, and reworked by those who want to be disciples but do not have the courage. They do not have the courage to wash feet, to do the dirty, humiliating, hands-on work that Jesus demonstrated was necessary again and again. They do not have the courage to see the person in need, pick him up from the ditch, pay for his care, then offer the caretaker more when he returns, nor do they have the courage to stand between a woman in trouble and hypocritical bullies ready to throw rocks. And we are about to see what has become a yearly onslaught by those tiptoeing, fearful, wannabe disciples as the Christmas season begins. We are about to see the difficult substance of being a follower of Jesus denigrated as the form of being Christian. The words about being Christian are lifted up as the most important thing. Form over substance. An easy, outward, and very visible example: the use of the X in the word Christmas. I remember my aunts fussing about this one Christmas decades ago, and it was something which I then felt obligated to take on as a personal crusade, even as a kid. It seemed dishonoring of Christ to seemingly replace him with an X. But then years later, I learned that following Christ was not about words or form. It was about doing and being and following. Here's what else I learned. X is the Greek letter chi. It is the first letter of the word Christ. It began to be used early on by those hundreds of stenographers who laboriously copied the manuscripts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and later Paul, and many, many others of the early church fathers. Chi, X, was also rumored to mark the meeting places in the Roman catacombs where believers and followers of the way would gather. These were largely illiterate folks, remember. With every chi or X that they scratched on the wall of a catacomb, they were honoring their Savior, as they would when they would trace X's on the ground with their feet when they met a stranger along the road. Oddly now, every time I write the X, and as I go back and look at my seminary notes, there are thousands of them. Every time I write the chi, the X, I feel like I am in a tiny way honoring those many, many illiterate peasants and others who moved Christ through those first difficult centuries with their stories, their presence, their deeds, their gatherings in times which demanded real and raw courage. Chi, X, was such a commonly used name for Christ that Constantine, in the year 325, the year that he proclaimed the Roman Empire to be the Holy Roman Empire, took the chi, added a rho, an R, CR, and made it into a symbol on his soldiers' on the soldiers' shields and on the flags which waved over battle. An unfortunate day in Christian history, perhaps, but not one meant to dishonor Christ at all. Later, in the 1500s, X enjoyed something of a revival when movable type began to be used. The Gutenberg press and others, you know. Since every single letter of a document or a letter being printed or a page that had to be printed, every single letter had to be carved of wood, it became desirable for printers, whenever possible, to shorten words, a kind of printed shorthand. There are many, many instances of the Lord's Prayer and other familiar texts being printed without vowels, for instance, to save tremendous labor. How is XMAS pronounced? It has always been pronounced Christmas. Christmas itself is a slightly shortened version of Christ's Mass, Mass being a worship service. The X, the chi, is not dishonoring. It is traditional. It does not make Christ any less holy than do the letters CHRIST, which are also merely symbols used to communicate the person and the office of Jesus the Christ. But this is only one tiny, however obvious, element of faith that those who celebrate form over substance will quibble with. Words, The proper use of words seems to reign supreme in the religion of many. It is, after all, so much easier to talk about words than it is to allow oneself to be transformed by the Word made flesh and lying in a feed trough in a stable. It is also so much easier to talk about how you love Jesus than it is to do something, anything, to help a neighbor, anyone in need. The war on Christmas is another headline and argument that is evidence of the superficiality of the religion of many. Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays becomes the significant theological and spiritual benchmark as people seek to measure the Christianity of others. 2 years ago, a major Dallas church established the GrinchAlert.com website, where people could tattle on various businesses that weren't using the right words, the right holy-sounding words in the conduct of their business. Consumers could write into the site and express their outrage or pleasure over how they had been spoken to or how they felt while doing business at a particular place. They could label their experiences as naughty or nice. I quote here from the Dallas Morning News. The comments came not only from Texas, but nationwide. A resident in Tulsa commented that the city voted to change the name of its Christmas parade to Holiday Parade of Lights. So Tulsa's on the naughty list. So are Sears and Kmart in Grand Junction, Colorado, because employees say Happy Holidays and not Merry Christmas while selling Christmas trees. Target made both the naughty and nice lists. One shopper disliked the lack of items with religious references to Christmas, naughty. But another shopper from Appleton, Wisconsin commented that Target displayed large Merry Christmas signs above the checkout lines, nice, unquote. Oh my. Love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. One might ask, where's the love in such a website, such an outward, silly, potentially unfair and distracting endeavor? And it's a good question. My answer is that there is no love at all to be found, except for the veneer-thin love of right-sounding words. Self-righteousness, Jesus called it. So, okay, what is the substance of Christmas then? If substance is far, far, far more important than form, what is the meaning, the substance of Christmas? The substance of Christmas is the same substance that should fill every day. Thanksgiving, the 4th of July, Labor Day, the 1st, 2nd, and 83rd days of summer, Election Day, and our birthdays, all of them. The substance of Christmas is the human manifestation of the divine, a manifestation which Jesus revealed then, went on to further reveal, could be manifested in each person who followed him. He was born a baby, not an angel. He grew up as a child who had some inkling of his father's business, to be sure, as he said. But as a child who played, laughed, depended on his parents, became an adult, and learned, just like the rest of us. He had a job, observed all the outward forms of his Jewish faith, bar mitzvah, Sabbath prayers, Passover, and then one day, after hearing the preaching of his cousin John the Baptist, he woke up fully. He awakened to his Christness, his role, his full humanity, and his full divinity. He fought that role in the wilderness, but overcame the very real opportunity that he had to retreat into the easy and popular choices available to him. Instead, he moved into the world for the world. As the Apostle Paul would later write, day by day he took on the form of a servant, eventually becoming that highest form of a servant, one who washes feet, one who puts all others ahead of himself, one who would go so far as to serve a meal to his betrayers, and then beyond. Beyond. He called others to follow him, and frustrating as it may have been, he allowed them, his disciples, to keep following him, even as they continually fell back into their own cultural biases of pride-seeking, judgment, discrimination, and jealousy. He reached through his own barriers of prejudice toward those who were unwanted, unlovable, and unknown to all but his Father. He said, love God, and then showed those disciples how to do that by loving your neighbor in the same breath. He scorned those who were obsessed with form. You whitewashed tombs, he called them, so beautiful on the outside, but full of dead men's bones on the inside. But he loved them anyway. Even the ones who would try him, condemn him, nail him, stab him, taunt him, and be glad when he was finally dead so that they could go home. He died in perfect and ultimate servanthood. That's the substance. X marks the spot. X is the mark on each of his disciples, imperfect though they and we are. X is our call to celebrate, not denigrate. X is our call to include, not separate. X is our reason for being all the time, not for just this season, but for any season. So, happy holidays and Merry Christmas.